Lee Junho stared at the alien warship through the viewing port and felt his stomach drop. The vessel was massive, easily 10 times the size of the human survey ship. Chiana, its dark metal surface seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and strange symbols glowed along its hull in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "This is bad," muttered Kang Minyu from beside him. The tactical officer was gripping the edge of the console so hard his knuckles had turned white. "We should have turned back when we detected their border markers." Junho said nothing. He was too busy watching the smaller ships detaching from the main vessel and moving toward them with frightening speed. The Veer Empire had found them, and there was absolutely nothing they could do about it. The impact came without warning. One moment the Chancellor was attempting evasive maneuvers, the next moment everything went still. Some kind of tractor beam had locked onto their ship, freezing it in place like an insect in amber. The lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized to a dim emergency glow. Captain Park's voice crackled over the intercom. "All hands prepare for boarding. Do not resist. I repeat, do not resist." Jun grabbed his personal bag from under his station. Inside were his research notes, his tablet, and most importantly, his diary his grandmother had given him. The leather-bound journal years ago, insisting that some things were better written by hand than stored in computers. He had filled 3 volumes already during this mission, documenting everything he observed about alien cultures and biology. The airlock hissed open with a sound like escaping steam. The first boarder to enter was human, which surprised everyone. She was a woman in her 40s, wearing a strange hybrid uniform that combined human military styling with alien armor plating. Her eyes were cold as they swept across the crew. "I am Commander Hana," she announced in Korean. "Former Republic of Korea Space Force. I now serve the Veer Empire. You will follow my instructions exactly, or you will be executed. Is this understood?" Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. "I said, is this understood?" Hana's voice rose sharply. "Yes," Captain Park said quietly. "We understand." Behind Hana came the Veer soldiers. Junho had seen images and videos of the species before, but nothing had prepared him for meeting them in person. They were tall, at least 7 ft, with bodies that seemed designed for warfare. Their skin had a strange quality to it, almost like polished stone, but with patterns of light that pulsed beneath the surface. Each had 4 arms, and their faces were angular and sharp, with eyes that seemed to see right through you. The soldiers moved with perfect coordination, separating the crew into groups. Junho found himself pulled away from his crew mates and pushed toward a different corridor. His bag was ripped from his hands despite his protests. "You are different," one of the Valkyrs said in broken English. "You come with us." Junho wanted to ask why, wanted to demand answers, but fear kept his mouth shut. He was marched through corridors that seemed too large for human proportions, past rooms filled with technology he could not begin to understand. Finally, he was brought to a massive chamber that could only be a throne room. At the far end, seated on a raised platform, was Queen Silvara. Junho had seen her image in intelligence briefings, but those images had not captured the reality of her presence. She was larger than the other Valkyr, her body covered in bioluminescent patterns that shifted through colors like oil on water. her forearms rested on the armrests of her throne, each hand adorned with rings that glowed with internal light. Her face was both beautiful and terrifying, with high cheekbones and eyes that burned with intelligence. "The human who writes," Silvara said. Her voice was deep and resonant, speaking perfect Korean that seemed impossible from her alien mouth. Come closer, come closer." Junho's legs moved on their own, carrying him forward until he stood at the base of the platform. The queen leaned forward, slightly studying him the way scientists might study an interesting specimen. "Your people intrude on our territory," she said. "Your ship carries weapons. Your crew includes military personnel. Explain why we should not destroy you immediately." Junho and LT Unk and GT's mind raced. He was a xenobiologist, not a diplomat, but he had to say something. "We meant no harm, Your Majesty. We are explorers," clears throat, "not invaders. We seek knowledge, not conquest." Silvara tilted her head, a gesture that seemed almost human. "Knowledge and interesting claim." She gestured with one hand, and a soldier stepped forward carrying Junho's bag. The queen reached in and pulled out his diary, the leather cover looking tiny in her large hand. "What is this?" she asked. "My journal, Your Majesty. My personal observations and notes." "Personal?" Silvara opened the diary and began flipping through pages. Her eyes moved across the Korean text with understanding, and Junho felt a fresh wave of fear. How much of their language did she know? What had he written that might anger her? And in one quote, the queen stopped on a page and began to read. Her expression did not change, but the patterns on her skin shifted to a deeper blue color. The room seemed to grow colder. "You wrote about my body," Silvara said quietly. The entire throne room went silent. Even the guards seemed to hold their breath. "You documented the structure of my exoskeleton, the arrangement of my limbs, the patterns of bioluminescence on my skin. You wrote detailed observations about Veer physiology based on intelligence reports and video footage." Junho felt his face burn with embarrassment and fear. "I'm a scientist, Your Majesty. I observe and document. I meant no disrespect." Silvara closed the diary and looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes were unreadable, her expression carved from stone. When she finally spoke, her voice carried throughout the chamber. "Tonight you will come to my room." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Junho felt his heart hammering in his chest. Around him, the Valthier Council members began whispering among themselves in their own language, sounds like grinding stones and rushing water. "Guards," Silvera said, standing from her throne. She was even more imposing, standing up, towering over everyone else in the room. "Take him to the detention quarters. See that he is given food and water. He will be brought to my private chambers after the evening meal." Junho was dragged away, his mind spinning with terror and confusion. Behind him, he heard the Queen's Council erupt into urgent conversation. Whatever was about to happen, it was clearly unprecedented. In the detention cell, Junho sat on the hard bench and tried to process everything. Through the wall he could hear Minyu's voice calling to him, asking what had happened, but Jun could barely form words to respond. He had written about the Queen's body in his diary, scientific observations, yes, but personal ones too, notes about how the Valthier physiology was fascinating. how their bioarchitecture represented an entirely different evolutionary path. And tonight he would face the consequences. The hours crawled by like years. Junho sat in his cell watching the alien symbols on the wall display cycle through patterns he could not read. He assumed they were counting down time, but to what end he did not know. Every few minutes, Minyu would call through the wall asking if he was okay, and Junho would respond with reassurances he did not feel. When the guards finally came, Junho and LT Unk and GT's heart nearly stopped. Two massive Veer soldiers stood in his doorway, their bodies blocking out most of the light. From the corridor, one of them gestured with a lower arm, "Come." The queen waits. Junho stood on shaking legs and followed them through the ship. This time he paid more attention to his surroundings, his scientist's mind automatically cataloging details despite his fear. The corridors were tall and wide, designed for beings much larger than humans. The walls had a strained texture, almost organic, and the lighting came from strips that ran along the ceiling in patterns that seemed to follow some mathematical principle. They passed other Valkyr who stopped to stare at the human being escorted through their ship. Some looked curious, others contemptuous, none looked friendly. The queen's chambers were in a section of the ship that felt different. The walls here were darker, the lighting more subdued. The guard stopped at a massive door that was covered in symbols and geometric patterns. One of them pressed a hand to a panel and the door slid open with barely a sound. "Enter," the guard commanded. Junho stepped through and the door closed behind him with a finality that made his stomach clench. He was alone in Queen Silvara's private quarters, and there was no escape. The room was not what he expected. Instead of luxury and decoration, it was almost sparse. The walls were covered with star maps and tactical displays. One entire section showed what appeared to be battle records and casualty reports. There was a workstation with multiple screens displaying data in the Veer language. In the corner stood a weapons rack holding various alien armaments. "You expected something different," Silvara's voice came from behind him. Junho spun around and found the queen standing near a doorway he had not noticed. She was alone without guards, which seemed impossible given her status. She had removed some of her ceremonial armor and now wore simpler clothing that still managed to look regal. "I expected a throne room or something like it," Junho admitted, deciding that honesty was probably his only hope of survival. "That is for others to see," Silvara said, moving into the room with a grace that seemed at odds with her size. "This is where I work, where I think, where I try to solve problems that have no solutions." She gestured to a sitting area where furniture had been arranged. The chairs were too large for Junho, but he sat anyway, his feet barely touching the floor. Silvara took a seat across from him, and for a moment they simply studied each other in silence. "You think I brought you here to punish you?" the queen said. "Finally the thought occurred to me. Yes, I am not offended by your journal," Silvara said, leaning back in her chair. "In fact, I am intrigued. Most species we encounter respond to us with either fear or aggression. They grovel or they attack. But humans do something different. You observe, you study, you try to understand." Junho felt some of his fear drain away, replaced by confusion. "Then why am I here?" "Because I need to understand you in return." Silvara said. My empire is failing, human we are. Losing ground to younger, more adaptable species, our traditions which once made us strong now make us rigid, we cannot change fast enough to survive in this new age. She stood and walked to one of the star maps on the wall, her finger traced a line through several systems. The Corythaean swarm advances here, we lose colonies monthly, our fleets cannot stop them because we fight the way we have always fought. Honor duels, formation tactics, single combat between champions, these things mean nothing to a hive mind that only cares about efficiency and consumption. Junho stood as well drawn to the map despite himself. His scientific curiosity was overcoming his fear. Yes, Silvara turned to look at him. When we captured your ship, I reviewed the combat records. Your vessel is small and weak compared to ours. Your weapons are primitive, yet your crew nearly escaped 3 times using tactics we had never encountered. Misdirection, feints, unpredictable movements that made no sense until they suddenly did. Human warfare evolved differently, Junho said carefully. We were never the strongest or fastest. We survived by being clever and adaptable. Exactly. Silvara's eyes seemed to glow brighter. I have been studying human history since we first made contact with your species. Your wars, your innovations, your ability to completely change your approach when old methods fail. This is what my people lack. She moved back to her workstation and pulled up files. Junho recognized images of Earth, human cities, military installations. The Ver had been watching humanity far more closely than anyone back home realized. Your journal showed me something important, Silvara continued. You looked at me, at my people, and you saw puzzles to solve, not monsters, not gods, just another species with our own biology and culture and challenges. You wrote about my exoskeleton structure the way you might write about an interesting rock formation or a new species of plant. I meant no offense, Junho said again, and none was taken. Silvara replied, but it made me realize that perhaps humans could see solutions that we cannot. Your perspective is entirely different from ours, where we see honor and tradition. You see problems to be solved through innovation. Junho felt his mind starting to race with possibilities. You want our help. I want to test a theory, Silvara corrected. I want to see if human thinking can really make a difference, or if I am simply desperate enough to grasp at anything that might save my people. She sat down again and gestured for Junho to do the same. When they were both seated, she looked at him with an intensity that made him feel like she was seeing into his soul. The Corythaean swarm will attack the colony world of Talvina in 10 days, Silvara said. We have a garrison there, but our projections show they will fall within hours of the assault beginning. I will give you and your crew access to our tactical information. You will have 10 days to devise a defense strategy that can save that world. And if we succeed, Junho asked, if you succeed, humanity will gain an alliance with the Vair Empire. Technology sharing, protected trade routes, a partnership between our species, Raylancy. And if we fail, Silvara's expression grew grim. If you fail, I will release your crew unharmed as a gesture of respect for trying, but Talvina will fall, and likely many more worlds after it. The swarm will continue to expand. Eventually they will reach Human space and your people will face the same threat we do now, Jun-ho thought. About his crew, about Earth, about the massive responsibility being placed on his shoulders. He was a scientist, not a military strategist, but looking at Silvara, he saw something he had not expected to see in an alien queen. He saw genuine concern for her people and honest hope that maybe, just maybe, these strange humans might have an answer she had not thought of. I will need my crew, Jun-ho said, all of them. And we will need complete access to your intelligence on the swarm. Agreed. Silvara nodded. And I want Commander Hana as our liaison, Jun-ho added. She understands both our cultures. We will need that bridge. Also agreed. Silvara said, you will begin tomorrow. 4. Tonight I have questions about your journal, about how humans think and observe. I need to understand the perspective you bring. They talked for hours. Silvara asked about Earth, about human culture, about how Jun-ho had learned to see patterns in alien behavior. Jun-ho asked about the Valier Empire, its history, its struggles, and slowly, impossibly, the conversation shifted from interrogation to discussion, from stranger to something approaching understanding. When Jun-ho finally returned to his cell in the early morning hours, Minyu immediately called through the wall, asking what happened. I think, Jun-ho said slowly, we just became military consultants to an alien empire. The next morning, Jun-ho and his crew were brought to a large conference room that had been hastily modified for human use. Someone had brought in smaller chairs and a table that was actually at a reasonable height. It was a small gesture, but it showed that Silvara was serious about this partnership. Kang Minyu looked around suspiciously as they entered. So, we are not prisoners anymore. We are consultants, Jun-ho said, at least for the next 10 days. Consultants, Park Jae-soo muttered, adjusting her glasses nervously. The young specialist looked like she had not slept well. Consultants to save an alien world from a hive mind invasion. Sure. Totally normal. Tuesday, Choi Yuna, the chief engineer, was already examining the technology in the room with professional interest. Look at these displays. The resolution is incredible. I would love to take one of these apart and see how it works, maybe after we save the galaxy, Minyu suggested dryly. The door opened and Commander Hana entered, followed by several Valier officers. The tension in the room immediately increased. Hana looked at her former human colleagues with an expression that was hard to read. I will serve as your liaison, Hana said in Korean. The Queen has ordered full cooperation. These officers will provide you with all tactical data on the Korathaean swarm and the defenses at Talvina. The Queen has officers one and the defenses at Talvina. One of the Valkyr officers, whose name translated roughly to Korath, stepped forward. He was massive even by Valier standards, and his body bore scars that spoke of many battles. His expression made it clear that he did not approve of this arrangement. I am General Korath, he said in heavily accented Korean. I command the garrison at Talvina. I do not believe weak humans can teach warriors anything useful, but the Queen has ordered this, so I will cooperate. But know that I do not expect success. Noted, Minyu said coolly. Now can we see the tactical situation? The displays around the room came to life, showing a three-dimensional map of the Talvina system. The colony world was marked in blue surrounded by defensive satellites. And patrol routes, red markers showed the projected swarm approach vectors. Junho studied the data carefully. Tell me about the Korathaean swarm. How do they attack? General Korth gestured in. The display shifted to show footage of previous battles. Junho watched as waves of swarm ships descended on Valkyr. Positions, the creatures moved with perfect coordination, their formations flowing like liquid. Around defenses, every ship seemed to know exactly where every other ship was going. They share a hive mind, Korth explained. Perfect coordination. No confusion. No fear. They attack in waves until defenders are exhausted, then overwhelm them with numbers. How do you normally fight them? Yuna asked. We meet them in honorable combat, Kor said proudly. Our champions challenge theirs. Our formations hold the line with discipline and strength, and you keep losing, Jai. Su said bluntly. Korath's patterns flared red with anger, but Hana stepped in quickly. The general speaks truth. Traditional Vaer tactics have proven insufficient against the swarm. That is why you are here. Junho walked around the display, viewing it from different angles. His mind was already working through possibilities. They have perfect coordination because of the hive mind. That is their greatest strength. Thanks for watching. They have. Don't forget to yes. Korath agreed. Then it is also their greatest weakness. Junho said. Everyone in the room turned to look at him. General Korath's expression shifted from anger to confusion. Explain. A hive mind needs constant communication. Junho said, his thoughts coming together rapidly. Every unit needs to know what every other unit is doing. That requires enormous amounts of data transmission. If we could disrupt that communication, even temporarily, the coordination falls apart. We have tried jamming, Korath said. Their communication systems operate on frequencies we cannot block without also disabling our own technology. Then we do not jam them, Jai. Su said, her eyes lighting up with understanding. We feed them false information, make them think units are where they are not, create ghost signals that look like real swarm ships but are actually nothing. Yuna nodded enthusiastically. I can rig transmitters using modified Valier technology. If we can analyze their communication protocols, we can inject false data into their network. The swarm will adapt. Eventually, you warned, hive minds are not stupid. They will figure out the deception. We only need to confuse them long enough. Junho said, disruption does not have to be permanent. We just need to create moments of chaos where they are not perfectly coordinated. Korath looked skeptical but intrigued. And what do we do during these moments of chaos? We hit them from unexpected angles. You said, stepping up to the display. You have been fighting them head-on, formation against formation, but if their coordination breaks down, you can use small rapid strike teams. Instead, hit supply lines, target command nodes, make them spread out to defend multiple locations. That is not honorable warfare. Korth protested. We do not strike from shadows like cowards. With respect, General, Junho said carefully. The swarm does not care about your honor. They care about consuming your worlds. Sometimes survival requires adapting your principles. The room fell silent. Junho could see the internal struggle on Korath's face. The Valthier officer was clearly torn between his cultural training and the reality of his Situation, Hana spoke up quietly. The general and I served together for many years. I know he values his people above his pride. If this strategy can save Talvina, he will use it. Reeling were. Reeling were reeling were reeling were. Reeling were reeling were reeling were. Korath looked at Hana for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Show me how. This would work, and the next several hours were spent planning. Jaisu worked with Valier communication specialists to analyze swarm signal patterns. Yuna coordinated with engineers to design the false signal transmitters. Minyu sketched out strike team tactics that would take advantage of moments when swarm coordination faltered. Junho found himself in the role of coordinator, bridging the gap between human creativity and Veer military structure. It was exhausting work made harder by the cultural differences and the constant need to convince skeptical Veer officers that these strange tactics could actually work. On the third day, Silvara visited the planning room. Everyone immediately stopped working and stood at attention, but she waved them back to their tasks. Show me what you have developed, she commanded. Junho walked her through the strategy step by step. The false signal injection, the small strike teams, the way they would use the colonies, industrial equipment as improvised weapons and traps, the psychological tactics designed to make the swarm behave unpredictably. Silvara listened without interruption, her glowing patterns shifting through various colors as she processed the information. When Junho finished, she turned to General Korth. What is your assessment, General? Korth was quiet for a moment before answering. It is unlike anything we have tried before, Your Majesty. It goes against our traditions and our training, but I believe it could work. The humans see warfare differently than we do. Then we proceed, Silvara decided. General, you will return to Talvina and prepare the garrison. Junho will accompany you as co-commander of the defense. The room erupted in protest. Several Valier officers began shouting at once, objecting to the idea of a human commanding their warriors. Korath himself looked shocked. Your Majesty, Kor said carefully, I do not question your wisdom, but the warriors will not follow a human. They will follow you. General, Silvara said firmly, and you will follow the strategies developed by this team. Junho will be there to ensure the tactics are implemented correctly and to adapt them as the battle develops. She turned to look directly at Junho. This was your plan. You will see it through. If it fails, you will stand beside our warriors. If it succeeds, you will share in the honor. Junho felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. This was real now. In 7 days he would be on an alien world, facing an enemy that had destroyed countless civilizations. He was terrified, but he also felt something else, purpose. I understand, Your Majesty, Junho said. I will not let you down. That night, Silvara summoned Junho to her chambers. Again, she looked tired, the glow of her patterns dimmer than usual. Do you think your plan will work? She asked. I think it has a chance, Junho answered. Honestly, better than what you have been trying. My people think I am desperate, Silvara said quietly. They think I am clutching at anything, no matter how foolish, because I cannot accept that our civilization is ending. Are they right? Perhaps, Silvara admitted, but I would rather die trying something new than die repeating old failures. Junho understood that feeling completely. The Journey to Talvina took 3 days at maximum speed. Junho spent most of that time in the command center with General Korth, refining their plans and trying to prepare for every possible scenario. The general had slowly warmed to the human strategies, though Junho suspected it had more to do with desperation than genuine acceptance. When Talvina finally appeared in the viewscreen, Junho felt his breath catch. The colony world was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents that reminded him of Earth. Orbital stations dotted the space around it, and he could see defensive satellites positioned at strategic points. It looks peaceful, Junho observed. It will not be peaceful for long, Korth replied grimly. The swarm arrives in less than 48 hours. Garrison on Talvina was impressive. Thousands of Valier warriors trained in massive facilities that could accommodate their size. Junho watched them drill in formations that had probably remained unchanged for centuries. They moved with precision and power, their forearms wielding weapons with practiced ease, but precision and power had not been enough to stop the swarm. The warriors are skeptical, Korth said as they walked through the base. Many believe this human plan is foolishness. Some believe it is cowardice disguised as strategy. What do you believe? General Junho asked. Korth was silent for a long moment. I believe that cowardice is watching your people die because you are too proud to try something different. The preparation was intense. Jaisu and the Veer communication specialists set up the false signal transmitters around the colony. Yuna worked with engineers to rig industrial equipment as improvised weapons. Mining lasers became artillery. Construction vehicles became mobile fortifications. Cargo containers were arranged to create kill zones and ambush points. Minyu trained small teams of Valkyr warriors in human strike tactics. It was challenging work. The Valier were used to fighting in large formations, standing their ground and overwhelming enemies with strength, teaching them to hit and run, to strike from unexpected angles, went against every instinct they had. Think of it like hunting. Minyu explained to one team, you do not chase prey directly, you herd it toward traps. You attack weak points, not strong ones. Warriors do not hide. One Valkyr soldier protested, we face our enemies with honor, and warriors do not let their people die because of pride. Minyu shot back, honor is protecting those who depend on you by whatever means necessary. The Valkyr soldier considered this, then slowly nodded. It was a small victory, but Junho saw these small victories happening across the base. The warriors were beginning to understand. On the final night before the swarm arrived, Junho could not sleep. He walked through the base, checking preparations one more time. Everything that could be done had been done. Now they could only wait. He found General Korth standing alone on an observation platform looking up at the stars. The general acknowledged Junho and LT Unk and GT's presence with a slight gesture of his upper right arm. Are you afraid, human? Korth asked, terrified. Junho admitted. Good, Korth said. Only fools and liars claim they do not fear death. Fear keeps you alert, keeps you thinking. They stood in silence for a while. Finally, Korth spoke again. I have fought in 43 battles. I have killed enemies in personal combat more times than I can count. I have always known exactly what to do because the answers were taught to me since childhood. But tomorrow I will fight in a way I have never fought before using tactics. That would have shamed me years ago. Does it still shame you now? Junho asked. Quietly, no, Korth said simply. Now I understand that true shame is letting tradition matter more than survival. Humans showed me this, you showed me this. I hope we are right, Junho said. We will know soon enough. The swarm arrived. With the dawn, alarms blared across the base as sensors detected the approaching fleet. Junho rushed to the command center where holographic displays showed thousands of red markers emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. Spirits of our ancestors, Korth breathed. The projections were wrong. There are 3 times as many ships as we expected. Junho felt his stomach drop. Their plan had been based on specific force calculations. With 3 times the enemy ships, everything changed. They were vastly outnumbered now, and the defensive strategy they had created might not be enough. Can we evacuate the colony? Someone asked. Not in time, Korth said. They will be in weapon range within 2 hours. We fight here or we die here. Junho forced himself to think past the fear. The strategy remains the same. Actually, this might help us. More ships mean more communication, traffic, their hive network, more data to disrupt, or more targets to kill us. Valier officer muttered. Prepare the false signal injection, Junho ordered, and get our strike teams ready. We hit them the moment their coordination falters. The next hour was agonizing. The swarm fleet approached in perfect formation, their ships moving like a school of predatory fish. Junho could see why conventional tactics failed against them. There were no weak points, no gaps in their coordination. They are entering weapon range, Korth announced. Beginning signal injection now. Jaisu initiated the false signal transmitters. On the displays, Junho watched as phantom swarm ships appeared in the hive network, showing up as real units in locations where nothing existed. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The swarm formation wavered. Ships suddenly broke away to investigate ghost signals. Some collided with each other as conflicting data told them to occupy the same space. The perfect coordination shattered into chaos. Strike teams, go. Now, Korth roared. Small groups of Valier warriors launched from hidden positions, hitting the confused swarm ships from unexpected angles. They targeted communication relay vessels, the nodes that helped maintain the hive network. Each destroyed relay created more disruption, more chaos. The swarm tried to adapt. Junho could see their ships attempting to reorganize, to filter out the false signals, but every time they started to stabilize, Jai-Su changed the parameters of the injection, creating new phantoms in different locations. Industrial weapons fire, Junho commanded. Mining lasers designed to cut through rock and ore now cut through swarm ship hulls. Construction equipment that could lift building materials now launched them like massive projectiles. The swarm had expected a military defense. They got a colony that had turned every tool into a weapon, but there were so many of them, even in chaos, even with coordination disrupted. The sheer number of swarm ships was overwhelming. They began adapting faster than expected, developing filters for the false signals. They are learning. Ju warned, I can keep it up, but they are getting better at ignoring the phantoms. A massive explosion rocked the command center. Part of the defensive perimeter had been breached. Swarm. Forces were landing on the colony. Surface, ground teams implement. Perimeter Defense Pattern 7, Korath. Ordered, draw them into the industrial. Sectors, ground teams. Junho watched on. Monitors as Valier warriors lured swarm. Ground forces into prepared kill zones. Cargo containers suddenly collapsed. Crushing the enemy, automated mining. Equipment activated, turning narrow. Passages into death traps, every street. Every building had been prepared as part of the defense. The battle raged for hours. Junho lost track of time, focused only on the constant flow of decisions and adaptations. The swarm kept attacking, the defenders kept holding but barely, then disaster struck. A swarm strike force broke through the eastern perimeter, heading straight for the command center. General Korath grabbed his weapons. I must lead the defense, he said. Continue to coordinate from here. General, wait. Junho started to say, but Korath was already gone. Through external cameras, Junho watched Korath and his elite guard meet the swarm forces in the courtyard. Outside the command center, the general fought like a legend come to life, his forearms wielding weapons that flashed like lightning, but there were too many enemies. Korath was surrounded, his guards falling one by one. The general fought on, refusing to retreat, holding the line so others could escape. Then a figure in modified armor appeared, firing weapons with deadly accuracy. Commander Hana had arrived with reinforcements. She fought her way to Korath's side, covering his retreat, even as she cut down swarm forces with precision that spoke of years of training with both human and Valkyr techniques. Fall back to secondary positions. Hana's voice crackled over the communication system. They withdrew in good order, the swarm forces pursuing, but they pursued right into another prepared kill zone. Shaped charges hidden in the walls detonated simultaneously, and the swarm force was obliterated. The battle continued through the night and into the next day. Slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. The swarm ships in orbit, taking heavy losses from the coordinated strikes. Their ground forces were being ground down in countless small engagements where Valkyr warriors used terrain and tactics to overcome numerical superiority. Finally, after nearly 30 hours of continuous combat, the swarm fleet began to withdraw. They had lost too many ships, taken too much damage, and achieved too little. For the first time in years, the Veer had won a decisive victory. Junho collapsed into a chair, exhausted beyond words. Around him, the command center staff was celebrating, but he could barely process it. They had won. Talvina had survived. General Korath returned to the command center, his armor scorched and damaged. He looked at Junho for a long moment, then spoke in a voice that carried to everyone present. The human strategies saved us. I doubted, but I was wrong. Today we learned that adaptation is not dishonor, it is survival as not dishonor. The days after the battle passed in a blur. Junho and his crew helped coordinate the cleanup and repair efforts, but mostly they tried to process what had happened. They had helped save an alien world using nothing but human creativity and a willingness to think differently. News of the victory spread throughout the Vair Empire faster than light speeded communications. The impossible had happened. The swarm had been defeated using strategies that violated every military tradition the Valkyr held sacred. Queen Silvara arrived at Talvina 3 days. After the battle, her flagship emerged from hyperspace accompanied by a full honor guard and the entire garrison. Assembled to greet her, Junho stood with his crew feeling very small and very human among thousands of towering Valkyr warriors. Silvara walked through the ranks inspecting the warriors and the damage from the battle. She stopped at several points to speak with soldiers who had distinguished themselves. Finally, she reached the platform where General Korath and the human team waited. General Korth, Silvara said, formally report on the battle. Stood at attention. Your Majesty, we faced a swarm force 3 times larger than projected. Using strategies developed by the human consultants, we disrupted their coordination, employed unconventional tactics, and inflicted losses that forced their retreat. Talvina stands. The colony is secure. And what is your assessment of these unconventional tactics? Korath glanced at Junho before answering. Your Majesty, I have spent my life believing there was only one way to fight with honor. The humans showed me I was wrong. They proved that honor is in protecting your people, not in following traditions that no longer serve us. These tactics should be taught throughout our military. Murmur ran through the assembled warriors. Some sounded approving, others shocked. Change was difficult for any culture, but especially for one as old as the Veer. Silvara turned to Junho, and you xenobiologist who became a military consultant, what have you learned from this experience? Junho thought carefully before answering. I learned that different is not wrong. Your Majesty, humans and Veer see the universe differently. Your people value strength and tradition. My people value adaptability and innovation. Neither approach is better, but together they create something stronger than either alone. Forum 17. I see. Come see. Silvara's pattern shifted to a warm golden color that Junho had learned meant approval. Well spoken. Come, I would speak with you and your team privately. They were brought to a conference room that had been set up in the garrison headquarters. Once the door closed and they were alone, Silvara's formal manner relaxed slightly. My council has convened and reached a decision, she said. We wish to propose a formal alliance between the Valkyr Empire and humanity. Technology sharing, protected trade routes, joint military training programs, and cultural exchanges. That is very generous, Your Majesty, Junho said carefully. It is necessary, Silvara corrected. This battle proved what I hoped. Your people see problems we do not see. You find solutions we cannot imagine. My empire needs that perspective if we are to survive. She pulled out a data tablet and handed it to Junho. This is the formal proposal to be presented to your Earth government. We are hoping you will serve as the first ambassador of this alliance. Junho stared at the tablet, not quite believing what he was reading. Joint research facilities, cultural exchange programs, a permanent human presence in the Valkyr Empire. It was everything humanity had hoped for when they first reached for the stars. Your government has already been contacted through official channels, Silvara continued. They are very interested and very proud of you and your crew. Apparently, you have become quite famous back on Earth. Jaisu laughed nervously. Famous for what? Almost getting killed by aliens and then saving them with computer tricks. Famous for showing that humanity can stand beside any species as Equal, Silvara said that is no small thing. Over the next few hours they discussed the details of the proposed alliance. Jaisu and Yuna would stay temporarily to help integrate human technology with Valier systems. Minyu would return to Earth to help develop the joint military training programs. Commander Ha would serve as the primary liaison, finally finding a role that honored both sides of her identity. And what about you, Silvara? Asked Junho directly. Earth offers you promotions and recognition. You could return as a hero, or you could stay here as our ambassador and continue this work. Junho thought about it. Earth was his home, but this work was important. The alliance between humans and Valier could change the future for both species, and if he was honest with himself, he was not ready to leave. I will stay, Junho said, for now at least. This is too important to walk away from. Silvara's patterns brightened noticeably. I was hoping you would say that. The formal ceremony establishing the alliance took place a week later. Aboard Silvara's flagship, representatives from Earth arrived via fast courier, including officials from the United Earth government and the Space Force. There were speeches and formalities that Junho found exhausting, but he understood their importance. When it was finally over and the Earth delegation had departed, Junho found himself walking through the ship's observation deck. The stars stretched out before him, infinite and beautiful. He thought about his grandmother who had given him that diary so many years ago. She had told him to document everything he saw, to never stop observing and learning. He wondered what she would think if she could see him now. You did not attend the celebration. Silvara's voice came from behind him. Junho turned to find the queen standing alone, which he had learned was rare for someone of her position. I needed some quiet time to think about what about how strange life is, Junho said with a slight smile. A few weeks ago, I was a xenobiologist on a survey mission. Now I am an ambassador helping to forge an alliance between species. All because you read my diary. Silvara moved to stand beside him at the viewing port. Yes, your diary. I still have it. You know, I assumed you would keep it as evidence or something. Not exactly, Silvara said. She pulled the leather-bound journal from somewhere in her robes and held it out to him. I read it completely, several times in fact. Junho took the diary, feeling the familiar weight of it in his hands. He opened it and found something unexpected. There were new entries, written in careful Korean script but in handwriting that was definitely not his own. You wrote in my diary? He asked, surprised. You wrote about my people, about our culture and biology, Silvara said. I thought it fair to write about yours, observations about human behavior, questions about your culture, thoughts about what I learned from working with you. Junho flipped through the pages, reading Silvara's neat additions. She had documented human problem-solving approaches, noted patterns in how his crew worked together, asked questions about Earth's history and development. It was like reading a xenobiologist's journal, but from the other perspective. This is fascinating, Junho said. Honestly, I learned from your method of observation, Silvara said, writing things down, thinking through them carefully rather than simply reacting. It helped me understand not just what you did, but why you did it. Junho noticed one entry near the end, dated the night after the battle at Talvina. It was longer than The others, and more personal, Silvara, had written about her fears for her empire, her hope that the alliance would work, and her respect for the human who had helped make it possible. The final line read simply, "I think the humans call this friendship." "You consider me a friend?" Junho asked. "I consider you someone who saw past what I am and recognized who I am," Silvara said. "Someone who offered help without expecting reward, someone who risked his life for a people not his own. Yes, I believe the human term would be friend." Junho felt something shift in his understanding of the queen, not the mighty ruler of an empire, but a person trying to save her civilization and finding unexpected allies in the strangest places. "Then, as your friend," Junho said, "I should tell you that back when you first summoned me to your room, I was absolutely terrified. I thought you were going to have me executed." Silvara's pattern shifted through several colors before settling on what Junho had learned was amusement. "I know your fear was quite obvious, but I also saw your courage in facing that fear and speaking honestly. Anyway, that is why I knew you were the right person to help us. So when you said I would come to your room that night, I needed to speak with you privately and understand your perspective," Silvara said, "though I admit I phrased it dramatically. Your reaction was quite entertaining." Junho laughed. "Despite himself, you intentionally scared me half to death. A little fear encourages honesty," Silvara said, and now her tone was definitely amused. "Besides, you wrote about my body in your diary. It seemed fair to make you uncomfortable." In return, they stood together at the viewing port, looking out at the stars. Two beings from different worlds, different species, different ways of thinking, but they had found common ground in respect and honest curiosity. "What are you writing in there now?" Silvara asked, nodding toward the diary. Junho had pulled out a pen and was adding a new entry. "I am documenting this moment, the beginning of an alliance between humans and Valier, and the beginning of an unusual friendship. What will you write about me this time?" And GT clears throat. And GT, that is classified information, Your Majesty," Junho said with a smile. "Tonight," Silvara said in that commanding tone, "from their first meeting, you will come to my room and you will bring that diary so I can read what you wrote." But this time there was warmth in her voice. This time it was an invitation between friends, not a summons from a queen to a prisoner. This time, Junho knew exactly what it meant. "I will be there," he promised. Months passed and the alliance grew stronger. The first joint human Valkyr colony was established on a frontier world. Technology flowed both directions, improving life for both species. Military exchanges taught Valkyr warriors human tactics, while humans learned Valkyr combat techniques. Cultural programs brought artists, scientists, and philosophers together to share ideas. And through it all, Junho served as ambassador, bridge between two worlds. He documented everything in his diary, which had become something more. Now a shared journal where both he and Silvara wrote observations and thoughts, a conversation conducted through written words across cultural boundaries. One evening as Junho walked through the new colony with Silvara, she asked about his latest entry. "What are you documenting now?" "The future," Junho said. "A future where humans and Valier face challenges together. Our differences make us stronger. Instead of dividing us, were a xenobiologist and an alien queen became friends and changed both their civilizations in the process. That is quite optimistic. Silvara observed. Maybe Junho agreed. But a few months ago, I was a prisoner, facing execution. Now I am an ambassador helping to build a future for billions of beings. If that can happen, anything is possible. Silvara's patterns glowed warm and bright. Then perhaps you should write about possibilities, about what we can build together. I will, Junho promised, pulling out his diary. Right after you tell me what you are planning to write in the margins. This time, that Silvara said with unmistakable amusement, is classified. That, and so the diary continued, filled with observations and questions, hopes and fears, the documentation of an impossible friendship that had changed the galaxy, two beings from different worlds writing their story together, one page at a time.